Hey everybody, long time no see. So, I figured, you know what? I'm going to do a video for here. I know it's been a while. What I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to talk about some of the most recent DVDs I've got in the world of professional wrestling. First, we're going to start off with JCW, Juggalo Championship Wrestling, Bloody Mania 6, with the Road to Bloody Mania. This is a 4 DVD set, as we've got the Road to Bloody Mania 6 stops in Taylor, Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And of course, we've got that all-important Bloody Mania 6 at Cave in Rock, Illinois. The matches on Bloody Mania: we've got JCW Tag Team Title 4-way match, as the champion Ring Riders take on the Headbangers, the Rock and Roll Express, and Madman Pondo and Necro Butcher. Next, we have the Juggalos versus the 5-0 versus the Police. Vampiro takes on Officer Colt Cabana. Next, we've got a Royal Rumble match where Bobby Lashley takes on X-Pac, Eugene, yes, that Eugene, Zach Gowen, Chris Masters, Shockwave the Robot, the Rude Boy, Carlito, and the Weed Man. Next, we have a triple threat match, as John Morrison takes on Matt Hardy and the Richie Boy, Briar Wellington. The next match we have is Scott Steiner and Vader versus Sean Summers and Roderick Street. Next we have, for the JCW Heavyweight Championship, a champion, Too Tough Tony, takes on Congo Kong. Now, on the actual Road to Bloody Mania shows, you've got such wrestlers as the Emo Warrior Jimmy Jacobs from Ring of Honor, the Richie Boy Briar Wellington, Butler Jeeves, from Ring of Honor, the King of Old School Steve Corino, Shockwave the Robot, IWA Mid-South's and ECW's own Ian Rotten, the Nigerian Nightmares, the Ring Riders, Madman Pondo, Necro Butcher, Officer Colt Cabana, Zach Gowen, Congo Kong, Weed Man, Too Tough Tony, former ECW champion and star Rhino, the Rude Boy, and the one, the only, the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal Sabu. Next, we have CZW Tangled Web 4. Now, I obviously didn't go to this show. I wish I did. It was a hell of a show. It was actually in the ECW arena in South Philly. Now, the matches on here, very simple. We start off with an aerial assault match. Ryan McBride versus Latin Dragon versus Pinky Sanchez versus Isaiah versus 13 versus Christian Hayam and a mystery opponent. Next, we have the Drew Gulak Invitational, as Kit Osborne, Oralax, and Mr. Question Marks, yes, that actually was his name, went against each other. Number 1 contender tag team match, as you saw the set, take on the Runaways, Blackout, and Azrael and Bandito Jr. Next, you had a corporate discipline match. Greg Excellent took on a mystery opponent. Next, you had Sami Callihan versus BJ Whitmer. Ultra Violent Tables match. Rory Mondo versus the Bulldozer, Matt Tremont. And for the CZW World Heavyweight Championship, you had a lumberjack strap match, as Black G's took on the reigning champion Devin Moore. The main event was a double ring Psycho Circus death match. What it was, on top of one of the rings was a Caribbean spider web of death. What happens? You go to the top of the scaffold, You throw your opponent off of it into the spider web. The match still ends by either pinfall or submission. Next, we get a little family friendly. Chikara Pro's I'll Be a Mummy's Uncle. Now, these aren't all the matches, since Chikara doesn't put all the matches on the back of their DVDs. However, these were just some of the matches. We had Ultramantis Black versus Ophinian, Jigsaw versus Tim Donst, Mark Angelo Setti, Mr. Touchdown versus Marchie Archie, or back at that point known as Mixed Martial Archie. Sarah Del Rey took on Kodama, and the main event was an Octomicos match as Eddie Kingston and the Colony took on Gekido. Now, that show was the start for what was, first off, a huge day of professional wrestling. There were, to my knowledge, at least 4 different shows going on that day. This was only the first one. Now, I only have DVDs of 3 of the shows that happened that day, that being the first. The next one, Jersey All Pro Wrestling's 14th anniversary show. What people thought would be the last show for Jersey All Pro Wrestling. Turns out, I've been talking with Fat Frank, and from what he's told me, they're still here. Matches on this show. You had Glitz and Glamour with Angelina take on the Midnight Sensations. A Warriors of Wrestling Heavyweight Championship match as Jason Karloff took on the champion, Jason Cross. Women's action, you had Mia Yim versus Kimber Lee. Next, you had the Southside Players Club versus the Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Monster Mac took on Gregory Iron. You had the best of the light heavyweights as Azrael took on Bandito Jr. versus Arcadia versus Ricky Reyes versus Devin Moore versus Pinky Sanchez versus Danny Demonto. And now for the 2 scheduled main events for the vacant championships. For the vacant tag team championships, you had the Strong Style Thug Outlaws of Eddie Kingston and the notorious 187 Homicide taking on Philly's Most Wanted of Black G's and the Joker. So, that was a great match. Next, and the main event for the vacant JAPW heavyweight title, Low Ki took on Dan Maff. Now, also that night, in Denellen, you had the NWS WSU King and Queen of the Ring tournament. Now, I'm not going to spoil the second round or the finals, but these were the teams and the opening matches for the King and Queen tournament. You had Jana and Johnny Knockout take on Rich Michaels and Nikki Sixx. Jennifer Cruz and Mike Dennis versus Dixie McGuire and Austin Williams. Jenny Rose and Jeff Cannonball Guerrero versus Nicolette the Monkey Girl and Nikki Oceans. Tina San Antonio and Jack Spade versus Rick Cataldo and J.D. Smoothie. I had to throw that in for Dapper. Now this DVD does have the second round and the finals. Non-tournament matches on here. You have, for the WSU Spirit title, the champion, Jessica Havoc, who, mind you, at this point, held both the WSU Championship and Spirit Championship, as she took on Marty Bell. And for the WSU Tag Team Championship, you had Allison Kay and Sassy Stephanie, the Midwest Militia, who were the defending champions, go against Alicia and Brittany Savage. Now, this next DVD, I'm not going to lie, I ended up getting for free because of a lot of snafus with the company Extreme Rising. I won't get into that here nor there. I will make a separate video on it just to give my thoughts. But I got sent the Extreme Reunion Show, which was a show that I did attend with Mike Johnson's Bus Trips. Now, there was another match that was not put on the DVD. I think it's a bunch of bull. It wasn't that. I don't even know the reasoning why it wasn't put on, personally. But you have the matches that are on here. The FBI of Little Guido and Tony Mamaluke took on the team of the BWO, Stevie Richards, and the Blue Meanie. Al Snow versus C.W. Anderson. Balls Mahoney versus Axel Rotten. The Gangstas, New Jack and Mustafa versus Angel of the Baldies and a mystery partner. Jerry Lynn versus Devin Storm. And Shane Douglas versus Too Cold Scorpio. Now what's kind of fun is you do have a lot of the old people from ECW in here. Even doing commentary, you do have Joel Gertner. Bob Ortiz is actually doing ring announcing, as well as Steven DeAngelis. Then from CZW, Robbie Marino is in here doing commentary with Joel. And, well, I'll just put it this way, too. This hot little Asian number actually stands up at one point and flashes her tits. Yay! Next, CZW's Tournament of Death 11. Okay? I did not go to the show. I regret every second of not going. It was an awesome show, an awesome time. I wish I went. Once again, since it's a tournament, I'm not going to give away any second round or finals. So, the first round was a drunken scaffold match. Lucky 13 versus Devin Moore versus Danny Havoc. Ultra-violent ladders, J.C. Bailey and Chris Cash tribute. Rory Mondo versus Drake Younger. Pains in the Glass, Scott Summers versus Masada. Ultra-violent Bats, Matt Tremont versus, from Big Japan Pro, Abdullah Kobayashi. Non-tournament match was Joe Gacy versus Ryan Slater. The Runaways take on one another in Fans Bring the Weapons. Now, you also have two ultra-violent bonus matches from Miami when they were with Dragon Gate USA. You have Danny Havoc versus Lucky 13 and DJ Hyde versus Drake Younger. Next, we're going to stay in Townsend, Delaware. CZW's Redemption. The Squared Circle of Fear. Oh, if you love blood, you love guts. Tournament of Death and this are two you have to pick up. The matches for this basically went like this. Dustin Reyes versus Rich Swann. Latin Dragon versus Mr. Tofiga. Greg Excellent and Shane Strickland versus Ohio is for Killers, which is basically the Christ brothers with Navia. They're actually part of a stable, Ohio is for Killers, with Sami Callihan. Then you had a street fight, Alex Colon versus Devin Moore. Four Loco versus the Nation of Intoxication. CZW tag team titles were on the line as Rory Mondo and Ron Mathis took on the Nation of Intoxication. Fans Bring the Weapons, CZW World Heavyweight title match. Joe Gacy versus Masada. And then the Squared Circle of Fear. DJ Hyde versus Matt Tremont. Also on here is a bonus match, the first Squared Circle of Fear match, as you had Lobo versus Zandig. Next, we're going to get back to kid-friendly, as we have Chikara, the Torino Cibernetico. Now, once again, since Chikara doesn't list all their matches, some of the feature matches that they have: Soldier Ant versus Mark Angelo Setti, the 1-2-3 Kid and Marty Jannetty versus the Heartthrobs, and then you have, in the Torino Cibernetico, Team Chikara, which consisted of Eddie Kingston, 3.0, Gran Akuma, Frightmare, Ultramantis Black, Hallowicked, and Tim Donst, as they took on Team Steen, or Team Ring of Honor, in Kevin Steen, the Bravado Brothers, the Briscoe Brothers, the Young Bucks, and Jimmy Jacobs. Now, let me quickly explain the Torino Cibernetico. As you heard, each team has 8 wrestlers. It's an elimination match, but once it gets to the end, even if there's 2 members of the same team left, they then have to wrestle each other until there's a winner, which is pretty cool. I actually love these kind of matches now. First Cibernetico I've ever seen. I'm hooked. Next, CZW Cage of Death 14. I was at this show. I'm happy. I actually got to meet a brand new friend, Amanda. Amanda, if you're watching this, yay! I know, gay moment. I have to. The matches on here, oh, great matches. You have Ultra-Violent Insanity for the CZW World Tag Team titles. The Nation of Intoxication versus 4 Loco. They did this in aerial assault pretty much. Next, you have Richard Swann taking on Shane Strickland. The Gulak Campaign of Kimberly and Drew Gulak versus the Excellents, Greg Excellent and Mama Excellent. Next was Who is the Best? Anything Goes match. Basically a CZW Rules match. Adam Cole versus Sami Callihan. A #1 contenders match for the CZW World Tag titles. Blackout versus Ohio is for Killers. A CZW Wired title match in an open challenge match. AR Fox had an open contract. Not going to tell you who signed it, but it's a blast from CZW's past. Next was the CZW World Heavyweight title match. Former champion, longest reigning CZW Heavyweight Champion, Drake Younger versus Masada. And then the main event, the coup de grace. Shattered Dreams Cage of Death. Matt Tremont versus the Boss, DJ Hyde. Let's just say, if you love blood and you love ultra-violence like I do, you have got to see this. Next, we're going to go to an event I was at. I'm proud to say that I've been a part of the first annual. Hopefully I will be a part of everyone after that. National Pro Wrestling Day. Action-packed event. I mean, the matches were brought on by so many different promotions. Like, just to give you an idea, this is a... First off, I have one of the DVDs in, but let me show you. 4 discs from Smart Mark Video for only $20. You can't beat that. And I mean, it's great action on here. I mean, I don't remember all the promotions, but the promotions I remember that put these matches on, I'll tell you. Ring of Honor had the Briscoe brothers versus Jimmy Jacobs and Steve Corino of Scum. Wrestling is Fun. Juan Francisco de Coronado versus Saturnine. House of Hardcore had Tommy Dreamer and Hale Collins versus Vic Delicious and Ben Ortiz. You had Ethan Page versus Josh Alexander. CWF Mid-Atlantic had Eric Royal and Chiva Kid versus Rick Corvus and Trevor Lee. CZW had Matt Tremont versus Rory Mondo and versus Latin Dragon. Wrestling is Art. Mike Quackenbush versus Colt Cabana. Sugar Dunkerton and Aaron Epic versus Chris Dickinson and Eric Corvus. Not Wrestling is Fun. Beyond Wrestling. Then you had the Rey de la Vordes first match, where you had Shane Hollister versus Too Cold Scorpio. Yes, Too Cold Scorpio. Versus Oliver Grimley versus Jojo Bravo. Kaiju Big Battle had Dr. Cube and Sekhmet versus American Beetle and Neo Teppan. Drew Gulak versus Francis O'Rourke. Then the second match for the Rey de la Vordes. ACH versus Bolt Bradley versus Surfer Mitch versus Luke Sharp. That was all in the afternoon. Then you had in the evening, you had Reed Bentley and Trip Cassidy versus Devin Bliss and Heidi Lovelace. The SAT versus Mike Drastek and Angel Ortiz. Christy Von Erie versus Isabel Sueña for WSU. Jay Bradley and Darcy Dixon versus Robert Anthony and a Thunder Kitty. Chikara had Los Ice Creams and Fist versus 3.0 and the Colony, Fire Ant and Green Ant. NYWC had Alex Reynolds and John Silver versus Tony Nese and Apollon. Evolve, Shane Strickland versus AR Fox. The Devastation Corporation versus the Estonian Thunderfrog and Latvian Proud Oak. Logan Shulo versus John McChesney. Ophinian and Cobalt versus the Hurricane and Matt De Niro. And then the Rey de la Vordes finals. All this was one day of professional wrestling. And they're doing it again next year. I cannot wait. I am so happy they made this a annual event now. If you get the chance, get the DVD from Smart Mark. Like I said, $20 for 4 DVDs. Get it. Now finally, we have, this is the first part of a double header. It's WSU and CZW. I'm actually going to be picking up the CZW DVD next weekend, as I will be going to CZW's Best of the Best. I will have results when those come up. So, as of right now, this is the first part of the double header, an ultra-violent affair. Now, in this show, you have Jesse Brooks versus Navia, Christina Von Erie versus Kimber Lee, Veda Scott versus Naya, Cherry Bomb versus Calamity, Andy Starr versus Chris Dickinson, a Beyond Wrestling match. Athena versus Jessica Havoc for the WSU Championship. The main event was Falls Count Anywhere. Mercedes Martinez versus LuFisto. So, you know, I mean, just for that night, the start of some great professional wrestling action. So, that's pretty much it for right now. When I get some more, I will fill you in. But mind you, this is now my collection. This is only not even breaking my collection, as I have over 200, if not now close to 300 wrestling DVDs. And more still to come. Like I said, I plan on getting so many more DVDs. It's not even funny. So, until next time, everybody, to quote Bill Apter, I'll see you ringside.